"Your brother is getting your share of the trust fund," my father announced, his voice cold and matter-of-fact. "You've always been healthy. You don't need it." I sat there in the lawyer's office, my hands gripping the armrests of the leather chair so tightly my knuckles turned white. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. My brother Jason, sitting across from me, threw his head back and laughed. Actually laughed, a sound so cruel it made my stomach turn. "Finally some justice," he said, grinning at me like he'd just won the lottery. "My name is Mariah. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a financial consultant in Memphis, Tennessee. For the past 4 years, I'd poured every cent I had into saving my brother's life. $200,000. Every bonus, every saved dollar, every sacrifice I made went toward his cancer treatments. I'd emptied my savings, taken out loans, worked extra hours until I was running on fumes. I did it because he was my brother, because family was supposed to matter, because I thought, stupidly, foolishly, that love and sacrifice would mean something. But sitting there in that office, watching him laugh at my expense, I realized I'd been nothing more than a convenient bank account. My grandmother had passed away 3 months earlier, and her will was finally being read. She'd set up trust funds for both Jason and me years ago, equal shares that were supposed to give us security. I'd never touched mine, never even thought about it during Jason's illness. The money I spent on his treatments came from my own pocket, from my own sweat and tears. But apparently that meant nothing. "The trust fund will help Jason rebuild his life after everything he's been through," my mother added, her tone gentle like she was explaining something to a child. "You understand, don't you, Mariah? You've been so fortunate. You haven't had to suffer like he has." I looked at her, at the woman who'd raised me, and saw a stranger. My father sat beside her, nodding along like this made perfect sense. Neither of them seemed to remember the late nights I'd spent researching treatment options, the calls I'd made begging for payment plans, the meals I'd skipped so I could wire money for Jason's next round of chemotherapy. "I spent $200,000 on his treatments," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Everything I had went to keeping him alive. And we're grateful for that," my father said, waving his hand dismissively. "But that's done now. Jason needs this money for his future. You have your career. You'll be fine." Jason leaned back in his chair, still smirking. "Come on, sis. Don't be selfish. I'm the one who almost died, remember?" The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He'd been my grandmother's attorney for decades, and I could see the conflict on his face. But he stayed silent, bound by my father's decisions as the executor of the estate. I took a slow breath, feeling something shift inside me. 4 years of exhaustion, of sacrifice, of believing my family would recognize what I'd done. It all crystallized into a single burning clarity. They weren't going to change their minds. They weren't going to suddenly see how wrong this was. They'd made their choice, and I was left with nothing. "Okay," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "But let me just make a call first." My father frowned. "A call? Mariah, this isn't—" I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady as I scrolled through my contacts. I'd saved this number months ago, back when I first started suspecting something wasn't right with the way my family treated me. Back when I noticed how every conversation somehow centered on what I could give, never what I deserved. "This will just take a minute," I said, hitting the call button. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Albert speaking." "Albert, it's Mariah," I said, putting the call on speaker. "I need you. It's time." My family stared at me, confusion crossing their faces. Jason's smirk faltered slightly. "Understood," Albert replied, his tone all business. "I have everything ready. Should I proceed with filing the paperwork?" "Yes," I said, looking directly at my father. "File everything. I want this done properly. Who the hell is Albert? Jason demanded, sitting up straighter. I smiled then, a small, cold smile that felt foreign on my face. Albert is the best lawyer in Memphis, actually one of the best in the entire state, and he's been helping me with something important. What are you talking about? My mother's voice rose with alarm. You'll find out soon enough, I said. Albert, send the documents to Mr. Patterson's office. I think everyone here should see them. Already on it, Albert confirmed. They'll have them within the hour. I ended the call and set my phone on the table. The room had gone completely silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. Mr. Patterson looked pale, my parents looked confused, and Jason's face had gone from smug to uncertain in seconds. What did you just do? My father asked, his voice low and dangerous. I stood up, gathering my bag. I made sure justice actually gets served. The real kind, not your twisted version. The week before that phone call, I'd been going through my grandmother's old letters. She'd been a meticulous woman, keeping detailed records of everything. I'd found them while cleaning out her house, boxes of correspondence and documents that my parents hadn't bothered to sort through. That's when I discovered the truth about the trust funds. My grandmother hadn't left equal shares. She'd left specific instructions that her estate be divided based on contributions to family welfare. She'd watched me sacrifice everything for Jason, seen how my parents enabled his selfishness, and she'd made provisions. The trust funds were supposed to be distributed according to who actually supported the family during crises. But my father, as executor, had decided to ignore those instructions. I'd grown up in a typical middle-class family in Memphis. My father ran an accounting firm. My mother was a school administrator, and we lived in a comfortable house with a nice yard. Jason was 3 years younger than me, and from the start, he'd been the golden child. Everything came easier to him, or so my parents believed. They saw his struggles as evidence of a sensitive soul that needed protection. They saw my successes as proof I could handle anything on my own. When Jason was diagnosed with leukemia 4 years ago, the family rallied around him. But rallying, I quickly learned, meant different things to different people. My parents rallied by being emotionally present, by visiting him in the hospital, by cooking his favorite meals. They expected me to rally by opening my wallet. Mariah, the insurance won't cover this treatment, my mother had said during one of our family meetings. But it could save his life. Can you help? I'd said yes without hesitation. $5,000 for the first treatment, then $10,000 for the next, then 20, then 50. The numbers kept climbing, and I kept saying yes, because I genuinely believed, that when this was over, my family would recognize what I'd done. But they didn't see it as sacrifice. They saw it as duty. You make good money, my father had said once, when I'd hesitated before writing another check. This is what family does. Don't be selfish. Selfish. That word had become their weapon of choice whenever I showed any sign of exhaustion or financial strain. I was selfish for wanting to keep some money for my own future. Selfish for suggesting Jason's friends and extended family might contribute too. Selfish for being healthy when he was sick. I'd worked with Albert for months, quietly gathering evidence and documentation. Every check I'd written, every wire transfer, every medical bill I'd paid, I'd kept meticulous records. My grandmother's letters had revealed her true intentions for the trust funds, and Albert had helped me understand the legal implications of my father's decision to ignore those instructions. Your grandmother was very specific, Albert had explained during our first meeting. He was a sharp-eyed man in his 50s, with a reputation for winning impossible cases. She wanted her estate to go to the family member who demonstrated true commitment and sacrifice. Your father's decision to override that is legally questionable at best. Can we challenge it? I'd asked. We can do more than challenge it, he'd replied, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. We can ensure her actual wishes are honored. And based on what you've shown me, that means the entire trust should go to you. I'd been stunned. The entire trust? Your brother contributed nothing during his own illness. In fact, he was the financial burden. Your parents contributed emotionally, but not financially. You're the only one who made actual sacrifices. By your grandmother's own criteria, you're the sole deserving beneficiary. But I'd hesitated. Taking everything felt wrong, even after everything they'd done. I just want what's fair, I'd said. Albert had looked at me seriously. Mariah, fair is you getting what you deserve after years of being taken advantage of. Your grandmother saw this coming. She knew your family's dynamics, and she tried to protect you. Let's honor that. Now, sitting in Mr. Patterson's office, I watched my family's faces as they tried to process what was happening. My father's jaw was clenched. My mother looked anxious, and Jason had gone pale. You're bluffing, Jason said, but his voice lacked conviction. You can't just take the trust fund. I'm not taking it, I replied calmly. I'm claiming what Grandma actually intended for me. There's a difference. Mr. Patterson's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it before his face went even paler. I've received the documents, he said quietly. From a Mr. Albert. I need to review these. What documents? My father demanded. Patterson, what's going on? Give him time to read, I said, settling back into my chair. I think you'll find it very enlightening. The minutes ticked by in tense silence. Mr. Patterson read through his tablet, his expression growing more troubled with each page. Finally, he looked up at my father. Gregory, he said slowly, did you read all of your mother's instructions regarding the trust distribution? Of course I did, my father snapped. She left equal shares for both children. No, Mr. Patterson said. She didn't. She left very specific criteria for distribution based on family contributions during times of crisis. And according to these documents Mariah's attorney has sent, along with supporting evidence, he paused, looking at me with something like respect. Your daughter has a very strong case that she's the only one who met those criteria. Jason shot to his feet. This is insane. I had cancer. Doesn't that count for anything? Sit down, Jason, I said quietly. You're about to learn what actual consequences feel like. The following days were a blur of legal documents and tense phone calls. Albert moved quickly, filing the necessary paperwork to challenge the trust distribution. The evidence was overwhelming. My grandmother's letters explicitly stated that her estate should go to whichever grandchild demonstrated selfless commitment to family welfare during times of great need. I'd found one letter in particular that had made everything clear. She'd written it 6 months before she died, knowing her time was limited. I've watched Mariah empty her savings to save her brother, she'd written in her careful handwriting. I've watched her sacrifice her own future without hesitation, while Jason accepts it as his due, and her parents enable his entitlement. This is not the family I raised Gregory to create. If my estate is to mean anything, it should go to the child who understands what family truly means, not obligation, but genuine love and sacrifice. My father had either not read that letter or chosen to ignore it. Either way, it was the foundation of my case. My parents tried everything to make me back down. My mother called crying, begging me to think of the family. I am thinking of the family, I'd replied. I'm thinking of the family I've supported for 4 years while everyone else made excuses. My father tried anger. You're destroying this family over money. No, Dad, I'd said calmly. You destroyed this family when you decided my sacrifice meant nothing. I'm just making sure Grandma's wishes are respected. Jason tried guilt. I almost died, Mariah. How can you do this to me? I saved your life, I'd responded. Every treatment, every medication, every hospital bill, that was me. And instead of gratitude, I got laughed at. So yes, Jason, I can do this to you. The truth was, I'd been building toward this moment for longer than they knew. It started small, about 2 years into Jason's treatment. I'd asked him once, during a visit, if he ever thought about how he'd pay me back someday. He'd laughed. That same cruel laugh I'd hear later in the lawyer's office. Pay you back? Mariah, you're my sister. You don't get paid back for doing your duty. Duty. The word had stung then, but I'd pushed it aside, telling myself he was sick and stressed. But the comments kept coming. My mother suggesting I take on extra work to cover another treatment. My father casually mentioning I should postpone buying a house because Jason's needs are more immediate. Every conversation reinforced the same message. My life, my dreams, my future, none of it mattered as much as Jason's comfort. The breaking point had come 8 months ago, after Jason's final treatment. He was declared cancer-free, and the family threw a celebration dinner. Everyone was so happy, so relieved. I'd walked in exhausted from working a double shift to pay off the last of his medical bills, and my mother had pulled me aside. Now that Jason's better, you can focus on your own life again, she'd said, patting my hand. Maybe find a nice man. Settle down. You've put your life on hold long enough. I'd stared at her, waiting for the acknowledgement that never came. Waiting for her to recognize what I'd sacrificed, what I'd given up. But she just smiled and went back to celebrating Jason's recovery. That night, I'd gone home and called every lawyer in Memphis until I found Albert. I need someone who specializes in estate law and family disputes, I'd told him. And I need someone who won't back down when my family tries to manipulate them. Albert had listened to my story and agreed to take my case. Start documenting everything, he'd advised. Every conversation, every request for money, every dismissal of your contributions, and find your grandmother's paperwork. If her will says what you think it does, we have a case. Now, 3 weeks after that initial phone call in Mr. Patterson's office, Albert called with news. The judge has reviewed everything, he said. Your grandmother's intentions are clear, and your father's decision to ignore them was legally unsound. The court is ruling in your favor. I sank into my chair, barely believing it. The entire trust? The entire trust, Albert confirmed. $2 million, Mariah. It's yours. And there's something else. The judge was particularly moved by your grandmother's letters and your documentation of financial support. He's also ordering your parents to repay you the $50,000 they borrowed from you last year for their vacation, the loan they claimed they'd forgotten about. I'd forgotten I'd even mentioned that to Albert. It had seemed like such a small thing compared to the $200,000 I'd spent on Jason. When will this be final? I asked. 2 weeks. They can appeal. But based on the evidence, any appeal would be frivolous. Start making plans for what you'll do with your inheritance. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, looking at the sparse furniture and bare walls. I'd lived like this for 4 years, every extra dollar going to Jason's care. My friends had moved into nice houses, started families, built lives. I'd put everything on hold, not anymore. I called my parents that evening. My father answered, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. I suppose you're calling to gloat, he said. No, I replied. I'm calling to tell you that this was your choice. You could have recognized what I did. You could have shown gratitude or at least basic respect. Instead, you laughed at me and tried to take what little Grandma left me. So yes, I fought back. And yes, I won. This will destroy our relationship, my mother said from the background, her voice breaking. Mom, I said softly. Our relationship was destroyed the moment you decided my value was only in what I could provide. I'm just the first one to acknowledge it. I hung up before they could respond. And for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten, the lightness of being free. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. My father, my mother, Jason, Even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. All of them suddenly desperate to talk to me. I deleted them without reading most of them and got ready for work. At the office, my colleague Hannah noticed immediately that something had changed. "You look different," she said, studying my face. Something happened. Hannah was the only person at work who knew about my family situation. She'd been the one covering for me during Jason's worst days, taking on my projects when I was too exhausted to function. "I won," I told her simply. "The trust fund case. I won everything." Her face lit up. "Mariah, that's incredible. After everything you went through, you deserve this." But even as I said the words, I felt a nagging unease. Winning felt good, but something about my family's sudden silence after that initial barrage of calls felt wrong. They weren't the type to give up easily. That afternoon, I got a call from Mr. Patterson. "Mariah, we need to talk," he said, his voice strained. "Your brother just filed a lawsuit against you." I sat down heavily. "What kind of lawsuit?" "He's claiming that the money you spent on his medical treatments was actually a loan, not a gift. He's arguing that he never asked you to pay for everything, that you insisted on it, and that you're using his illness to manipulate the inheritance situation." The audacity of it knocked the breath out of me. "That's absurd. I have documentation." "I know," Mr. Patterson interrupted, "and Albert knows. But your brother has hired Mitchell Graves. Do you know who that is?" I did. Mitchell Graves was a notorious attorney in Memphis, known for taking impossible cases and finding technicalities to exploit. He was expensive, which meant Jason had found someone to fund this lawsuit. "My parents are backing this," I said, realization dawning. "Most likely. Mitchell doesn't come cheap. Mariah, this is going to get ugly. They're going to try to paint you as someone who held your brother's illness over his head." I called Albert immediately. He'd already heard about the lawsuit. "This is a desperate move," he said. "But desperate moves can be dangerous. They're going to subpoena your bank records, your communications with Jason during his illness. They're going to look for anything that suggests you expected repayment." "I never expected repayment," I said. "I just wanted acknowledgement, recognition that I'd sacrificed something." "I believe you, but we need to be prepared. Did you ever say anything to Jason that could be misconstrued? Any text message, any email where you mentioned the money?" I thought back, my heart sinking. There had been one conversation, about a year ago. Jason had been complaining about being bored during recovery, wanting to take an expensive vacation to heal properly. I'd been at my breaking point, exhausted from working overtime to pay off his latest bills. I told him I couldn't help with a vacation, I said slowly. I said something like, "I've already given you everything I have." "Could they use that?" Albert was quiet for a moment. "Potentially. They could argue that phrasing suggests you viewed it as a transaction, but we can counter it. The context matters. You were explaining why you couldn't give him more money, not demanding repayment. The lawsuit consumed the next 2 weeks. Mitchell Graves filed motion after motion, each one designed to delay the trust fund distribution and paint me as a villain. The local media picked up the story. Sister Sue's brother over inheritance after paying medical bills. And suddenly, I was being judged by strangers who knew nothing about what I'd endured. My mother gave an interview to a local news station, tears streaming down her face as she talked about how heartbroken she was that I was using Jason's cancer as leverage. She was always so generous during his illness, my mother said, dabbing at her eyes. We thought it came from love, but now we see it was calculated. She kept receipts of everything, documented every dollar. What kind of sister does that? I watched the interview in my apartment, feeling sick. They were twisting everything, making my practical decision to keep records look like evidence of manipulation. Hannah came over that night with wine and takeout. "Don't watch that garbage," she said, turning off the television. "Anyone who knows you knows the truth." "But most people don't know me," I replied. "They just see the headlines." Cruel sister denies cancer survivor his inheritance. The truth will come out in court, Hannah insisted. Albert's good. He'll make sure of it. But I wasn't so sure anymore. Mitchell Graves was already creating reasonable doubt, suggesting alternate interpretations of my actions. What if the judge believed them? What if I ended up with nothing, after all of this? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation with Jason, every text message, looking for ammunition they could use against me. And then I remembered something I'd almost forgotten about. The recordings. About 18 months into Jason's treatment, I'd started feeling uneasy about our family dynamics. The way my parents casually asked for money, the way Jason took my help for granted. It had started to feel less like family support and more like exploitation. So I'd begun recording some of our conversations, just in case I ever needed to protect myself. I'd felt guilty about it at the time, like I was betraying family trust. But now, digging through my old files, I found them. Hours of recordings from family dinners, phone calls, meetings about Jason's care. And in those recordings was the truth. Every casual dismissal of my sacrifice, every entitled demand, every moment they'd made clear my worth was only in my wallet. I called Albert at midnight. I have recordings, I said, from during Jason's treatment, conversations with my family. Are they legally obtained? Albert asked immediately. Tennessee is a one-party consent state, so as long as you were part of the conversation. I was, I confirmed. Every single one. Send them to me. Now. This could change everything. I spent the rest of the night uploading files to Albert's secure server. As each recording transferred, I listened to snippets. My mother's voice saying, "Mariah's salary is higher. She should cover more." My father explaining to Jason that, "Your sister doesn't need her savings. She's investing in family." Jason himself, in one particularly clear recording, saying, "Why would I thank her? She's supposed to help me. That's what sisters do." By morning, Albert had reviewed everything. "Mariah," he said, his voice carrying barely contained excitement, "these recordings don't just defend you. They destroy their case. In fact, they open up new possibilities. Your family's behavior could be construed as financial exploitation. We might be able to argue for more than just the trust fund." What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, we might be able to get your $200,000 back. Every cent you spent on Jason's treatment. We might be able to prove your family coerced you into it through emotional manipulation." The courtroom was packed the day Albert played the recordings. Mitchell Graves had been confident, strutting around like he'd already won. My parents sat behind Jason, my mother holding his hand, both of them looking like victims in their carefully chosen conservative clothes. I sat with Albert at our table, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I'd learned to hide my emotions over the past 4 years. That skill was serving me well now. "Your Honor," Albert began, "the defense has painted Miss Mariah as someone who manipulated her brother's illness for personal gain. They claim she kept records as evidence of loans, not gifts. But I'd like to present evidence that tells a very different story. One of systematic exploitation of a young woman's love for her family." Mitchell Graves objected immediately. "Your Honor, this is a transparent attempt to distract from—" "I'll allow it," Judge Walsh interrupted. "She was a woman in her 60s, known for being fair but strict. Proceed, Mr. Albert." Albert played the first recording. It was from a family dinner 2 years ago. My father's voice came through clearly. "Mariah, we need to talk about Jason's next treatment. Insurance denied it, but the doctor says it's crucial. How much can you contribute?" My voice, tired. "Dad, I've already given $40,000 this year. I'm running out of savings." Jason's voice, petulant. "So you're going to let me die because you want to keep your money?" My mother, "Mariah, please, don't be selfish. Your brother needs you." The courtroom was silent. I watched my parents' faces drain of color. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Albert played another recording, this one from a phone call. My mother's voice. Mariah, your father and I were thinking of taking a vacation when Jason's treatment ends. Just a week somewhere warm. We've been so stressed. Could you help with the cost? Maybe $5,000 or $6,000? Me. Mom, I'm barely keeping up with Jason's medical bills. My mother, her voice hardening. We've been there for Jason emotionally. That's just as valuable as money. You can afford to help your parents after everything we've done for you. Albert let that one sink in before playing the worst one. It was from 3 months before my grandmother died. Jason was in remission, declared cancer-free. The family had gathered for a celebration dinner. Jason's voice, laughing. You know what's funny? Mariah's been so focused on keeping me alive. She forgot to have a life of her own. No boyfriend, no house, nothing. Just work and more work. My father, amused. Well, that's what happens when you make your family your whole world. But we appreciate it, honey. Your sacrifice meant something. My mother. Though really, Mariah, now that Jason's better, you should think about your own future. You're 30 years old. Time to stop being everyone's bank and find a husband. Jason again. Yeah, sis. Your job's done. Time to get your own life. The recording ended. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. I saw several jury members looking at my family with undisguised disgust. Judge Walsh leaned forward. Mr. Graves, would you like to respond to this evidence? Mitchell Graves stood, but for the first time since the trial began, he looked uncertain. Your Honor, these recordings lack context. Family conversations can sound harsh when taken out of... These recordings have plenty of context, Albert interrupted. They show a pattern of emotional manipulation and financial exploitation spanning 4 years. Miss Mariah wasn't keeping receipts to demand repayment. She was keeping receipts because she was being systematically drained by her family, and some part of her knew she might need to protect herself. Objection. Mitchell Graves was getting desperate now. This is speculation about my client's state of mind. Sustained, Judge Walsh said, but her expression suggested she'd already made up her mind. Albert played 3 more recordings, each one more damning than the last. The final recording was from the day before my grandmother's will reading. My father's voice. Tomorrow we find out about Mother's estate. I've already decided Jason should get both trust funds. Mariah's done well for herself. She doesn't need it. My mother. Are you sure? Won't she object? My father. If she does, we'll remind her about family loyalty. After all, she'd hate for people to know she's been keeping score of every dollar she spent on her brother. Makes her look petty. The recording clicked off. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Walsh banged her gavel. Order, she called. Mr. Graves, does your client wish to proceed with his lawsuit? I watched Jason lean toward Mitchell Graves, whispering frantically. Mitchell's face was grim as he listened. Finally, he stood. Your Honor, in light of this new evidence, my client wishes to withdraw his lawsuit. Motion granted, Judge Walsh said. She turned to look directly at my family. However, I'm troubled by what I've heard today. These recordings suggest financial elder abuse and coercion. I'm ordering a full investigation into the family's treatment of Miss Mariah over the past 4 years. My father shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is unnecessary. Sit down, Mr. Gregory, Judge Walsh said sharply. You've already proven yourself unreliable as an executor of your mother's estate. The investigation will determine whether criminal charges are warranted. Furthermore, I'm awarding Miss Mariah her full inheritance as originally planned, along with court costs and attorney fees to be paid by the plaintiffs. Mitchell Graves tried one last time. Your Honor, my clients don't have the resources to... Then they should have thought of that before filing a frivolous lawsuit, Judge Walsh snapped. We're adjourned. As people filed out of the courtroom, I sat perfectly still. I'd won. Not just the inheritance, but vindication. The truth was out, recorded and undeniable. My mother tried to approach me in the hallway, but Albert stepped between us. "I wouldn't recommend contact right now," he said firmly, "not while the investigation is pending." My mother's face crumpled. "Mariah, please. We're still family." I looked at her, this woman who'd raised me but never really seen me. "No," I said quietly. "We're not. Family doesn't exploit each other. Family doesn't mock each other's sacrifices. You made your choice when you laughed at me in that lawyer's office. I'm just making mine now." Jason pushed forward, his face red. "You vindictive! You planned this! You recorded us deliberately!" "I protected myself," I corrected, "because somewhere deep down, I knew you'd eventually show your true colors. I just didn't realize how ugly those colors would be." My father stood apart from the others, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. "This isn't over," he said. "The investigation won't find anything. You'll see." Albert smiled coldly. "Actually, Mr. Gregory, based on those recordings, I'd say the investigation will find quite a lot. Financial coercion, elder abuse of Mariah herself, possible fraud in the handling of the estate. I'd recommend you find a good criminal defense attorney." I watched my father's face go pale, watched the reality of consequences sink in. For years, they'd acted without accountability, secure in the knowledge that I'd keep sacrificing, keep giving, keep enabling their entitlement. Not anymore. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, state financial investigators had combed through 4 years of records. What they found painted an even uglier picture than the recording suggested. My parents had lied about their financial situation. They weren't struggling to help Jason. They had significant savings they'd never touched. Instead, they'd manipulated me into covering costs they could have easily paid themselves. The vacation they'd asked me to fund, they'd taken 3 others in the previous year, all paid from their retirement accounts. But the worst discovery came when investigators looked into Jason's medical bills. Albert called me on a Tuesday afternoon. "Mariah, are you sitting down?" "What did they find?" "Your brother's insurance covered more than he told you. Significantly more. Of the $200,000 you paid, only about $80,000 was actually necessary. The rest was for elective treatments, comfort upgrades, and expenses that insurance had already reimbursed." I felt dizzy. "What do you mean reimbursed?" "Your brother was submitting claims twice. Once to insurance, once to you. He pocketed the difference, and your parents knew about it. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that I couldn't even process it at first. I'd been working myself into exhaustion, missing mortgage payments, eating ramen for dinner, while Jason was profiting from my love for him. The district attorney is filing fraud charges," Albert continued, "against all 3 of them. Your brother for insurance fraud and financial exploitation. Your parents for conspiracy and elder financial abuse." "Elder abuse?" I repeated numbly. "Tennessee law defines vulnerable adults as anyone being exploited regardless of age. The systematic nature of what they did to you qualifies. Mariah, they could face serious jail time." I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt hollow. This was my family. The people who'd raised me, who I'd loved unconditionally, and they'd systematically destroyed that love for money they didn't even need. Hannah convinced me to take a week off work. I spent it in a cabin in the Smoky Mountains, away from phones and people. I needed to think, to process everything that had happened. On the 3rd day, I got a letter. It had been forwarded from my apartment. The return address was from a state prison. Someone had already been arrested pending trial. It was from Jason. I almost threw it away without reading it, but something made me open it. The letter was short, written in Jason's familiar scrawl. "Mariah, I know you won't believe this, But I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. I'm sorry I did it in the first place. You want to know the worst part? I didn't even need most of that money. I wanted it. I wanted you to prove you loved me more than your own comfort. And when you kept giving, kept sacrificing, I despised you for it. I despised you for being better than me, for showing me exactly what kind of person I'd become. Mom and Dad taught me that family exists to serve me. You showed me what family could actually be, and I hated you for it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that somewhere in the wreckage of what I became, I knew you were the only real one among us. I read the letter 3 times, then burned it in the cabin's fireplace. His words didn't change anything. They didn't undo the exploitation, didn't restore the years I'd lost. But they did give me something I hadn't expected: clarity. My family hadn't just taken my money. They'd taken my ability to trust, to believe in the goodness of the people who should have loved me most. But they hadn't taken my strength. That I'd built myself. One exhausting shift at a time. One sacrifice at a time. One moment of standing back up when they'd tried to keep me down. When I returned to Memphis, there was a message from my grandmother's lawyer, Mr. Patterson. "Mariah, there's something else in your grandmother's estate you should know about. Can you come to my office?" I met him the next day. He looked older than I remembered, worn down by the revelations about my family. "Your grandmother left you something beyond the trust fund," he said, sliding a document across his desk. "A letter to be given to you only after the distribution was finalized." I opened it with trembling hands. My grandmother's handwriting filled the page. "My dearest Mariah, if you're reading this, then you've fought for what you deserve. I'm proud of you. I watched you sacrifice everything for a brother who never appreciated it. For parents who saw you as a resource rather than a daughter. I wanted to protect you. But I also wanted you to find your own strength. The trust fund is yours by right, but more importantly, by character. Use it not just to rebuild what you've lost, but to build something new, something they can never touch. And remember, the best revenge is a life well lived. Love always, Grandma." I sat in Mr. Patterson's office and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. Someone had seen me. Someone had understood. The district attorney offered my family a plea deal: return the fraudulent money, serve probation, and admit guilt publicly. My father refused at first, insisting on fighting the charges. But when the evidence against them became public, when neighbors and colleagues turned away in disgust, he accepted the deal. Jason served 6 months in jail for fraud before being released on probation. My parents got 2 years probation and were ordered to pay restitution. Not just the fraudulent medical costs, but damages for emotional distress. The amount was substantial, forcing them to sell their house and downsize. I didn't attend their sentencing. Albert handled it for me. I was busy with other things, specifically buying my first house, a beautiful craftsman in a quiet Memphis neighborhood. The trust fund had given me financial security I'd never imagined. But more than that, it gave me the freedom to rebuild my life on my own terms. Hannah helped me move in, along with a few other friends from work. We ordered pizza, drank cheap wine, and christened every room with laughter. As I stood on my new porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mariah." It was my mother's voice, small and broken. "Please, can we talk? We made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but we're still your parents. Doesn't that count for something?" I looked at my new home, at Hannah laughing with friends in the living room, at the life I'd built from the ashes of my family's betrayal. "You were my parents," I said quietly. "But being a parent means more than biology. It means seeing your child as a person, not a resource. You never learn that. I hope someday you do, for your own sake. But it won't be with me. Goodbye. I hung up and blocked the number. Then I walked back inside to my chosen family, to the people who saw me for who I was, not what I could give. The past was finally, truly behind me. 6 months after the trial, I was sitting in a coffee shop reviewing financial reports when I saw her, my mother, standing in line, looking smaller somehow. She hadn't noticed me yet, and for a moment I considered leaving. But something kept me in my seat. She ordered her coffee and turned, our eyes meeting. Her face went through a series of emotions: shock, hope, fear. She walked toward my table hesitantly. "Mariah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I come here every Tuesday," I replied evenly, "for the past 3 months." She understood the implication. This was my space now, and she was the intruder. "May I sit?" I gestured to the empty chair. She sat down carefully, clutching her coffee cup like a lifeline. "You look well," she said. "I am well." The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, she spoke again. "Your father and I lost the house last month. We're renting a small apartment in East Memphis now. Jason's living with us. He can't find a job with his record." I sipped my coffee and said nothing. "I know you don't want to hear this," she continued, her voice cracking. "But we're struggling. The restitution payments, the legal fees, Jason's probation costs. We can barely make rent. And you're telling me this because?" She looked down at her hands. "Because I hoped. I thought maybe, given time, you might be willing to help. Just a little. We're family, after all." The audacity of it would have made me laugh if it wasn't so pathetic. Here she was, after everything, still thinking she could tap into my resources, still believing that the word family held some magical power over me. "Do you know what I did yesterday?" I asked calmly. "I donated $50,000 to a cancer research charity, in my grandmother's name. Not Jason's. He doesn't deserve that honor. But Grandma, who actually understood what sacrifice meant." My mother's face crumpled. $50,000? "Mariah, we're about to be evicted and you're just giving away." "Giving away my money," I interrupted. "My inheritance. My choice. The same way it was your choice to steal from me for years. The same way it was your choice to mock my sacrifices and then try to take what little Grandma left me." "We made mistakes," she whispered. "But we're paying for them. How long are you going to punish us?" I set down my coffee and looked at her directly. "I'm not punishing you, Mom. I'm just not saving you. There's a difference. You taught me that actions have consequences. I'm just letting you experience those consequences without interference." "So you're going to watch us lose everything?" "You lost everything the moment you decided I was worth less than Jason," I replied. "I'm just refusing to pretend otherwise anymore." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You've become cruel, Mariah. Hard. This isn't the daughter I raised." "No," I agreed. "The daughter you raised would have already written you a check, would have sacrificed her own stability to fix your problems, would have believed that family meant endless self-destruction for people who would never appreciate it. I'm not that daughter anymore, and you're the ones who killed her." She left without another word, and I went back to my financial reports. My hands were steady, my heart rate normal. There was no guilt, no second-guessing. Just the quiet satisfaction of boundaries finally, firmly in place. That evening, I had dinner with Hannah and her fiancé Stephen at a new restaurant downtown. They were planning their wedding, and Hannah wanted my input on venues. "What about the Riverbend estate?" she suggested, showing me photos on her phone. It's beautiful, and they have this gorgeous garden for outdoor ceremonies. I looked at the images. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, flowers cascading from arbors, string lights creating a canopy of stars. It was beautiful. It was hopeful. It was everything a wedding should be. "It's perfect," I said. "Book it." Stephen smiled. "Hannah said you'd approve. She's been talking about it for weeks, but wanted your blessing first." "Why my blessing?" I asked, genuinely curious. Hannah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Because you're my family, Mariah. The real kind. The kind that shows up. And I wanted you to be part of this decision." Something tight in my chest loosened. This was what family looked like. People who valued your opinion, who included you in their joy, who saw you as essential rather than expendable. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Please, Mariah. Jason's sick again. Just a cold, but with his medical history, we're worried. Can you at least call and check on him?" I deleted it without responding and silenced my phone. "Everything okay?" Hannah asked. "Everything's fine," I replied. And I meant it. The next day, Albert called with news that made everything even better. "The court has approved your motion to reclaim the full $200,000 you spent on Jason's treatment. With interest and damages, the total comes to $247,000. "When do I get it?" I asked. "That's the interesting part," Albert said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Your parents have to pay it. The court is garnishing their income until it's repaid in full. Given their current financial situation, that could take decades." I hung up and stared out my office window at the Memphis skyline. Justice, it turned out, wasn't always swift, but when it finally arrived, it was thorough. 3 months later, I was invited to speak at a financial literacy conference in Nashville. The topic was protecting yourself from financial exploitation, even by family. I almost declined. Public speaking wasn't my strength, and talking about my family's betrayal still felt raw sometimes. But Hannah convinced me. "Your story could help people," she said. "People who are going through what you went through, who think they're alone." So I went. The conference was held at a downtown hotel, and my session was scheduled for the second day. I'd prepared a presentation focusing on the practical aspects, keeping records, understanding legal rights, recognizing warning signs of financial abuse. What I wasn't prepared for was the crowd. The room was packed, standing room only. As I took the stage, I saw faces that reflected my own past struggles. Exhaustion, confusion, the weight of carrying others who refused to stand on their own. "My name is Mariah," I began. "And for 4 years, I gave my family $200,000. I thought I was being a good daughter, a good sister. I thought sacrifice was the same as love. I was wrong." I told my story, carefully omitting identifying details, but keeping the emotional truth intact. The room was silent except for occasional sniffles and the scratch of pens on paper as people took notes. "The hardest part," I said, "wasn't the money. It was accepting that the people I loved most saw me as a resource, not a person. It was realizing that family had become a weapon they used against me, instead of a bond that connected us." After my presentation, the line for questions stretched across the room. A woman in her 50s approached, tears streaming down her face. "I've been supporting my brother for 15 years, she said. "He's never held a job longer than 6 months. My husband wants me to cut him off, but he's family. What do I do?" I looked at her, seeing myself from years ago. "Ask yourself this. If he weren't family, would you accept this behavior from anyone else? If the answer is no, then you have your answer. Being related doesn't give someone the right to drain you dry." An elderly man was next. "My children expect me to pay for everything. Their mortgages, their cars, their vacations. I'm running out of retirement savings. But I'm their father. Isn't it my job to provide?" "Your job was to raise them to be independent adults," I replied gently. If they can't support themselves now, continuing to enable them isn't helping. It's hurting. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face their own consequences. For 2 hours, I answered questions, gave advice, and watched people come to the same painful realizations I'd reached. By the end, I was emotionally exhausted, but strangely fulfilled. My suffering had purpose now. It could help others avoid the same trap. That evening, as I packed to return to Memphis, I got an email from Jason. Somehow, he'd found my work address. Mariah, I saw your presentation online. They recorded it and posted it. I just wanted you to know. I watched it. I heard what you said about us. And you were right about everything. I destroyed your trust in family because I never learned what family really meant. Dad and Mom are still in denial, but I'm not. I'm trying to be better. Not for you. You owe me nothing. But for myself. Because I don't want to be the person who broke his sister for pocket change. I hope someday you can be proud of who I become, even if you're never part of my life again. I read it twice, then filed it away without responding. His growth was his responsibility, not my concern. Maybe someday his words would mean something. But right now, they were just words from someone who'd already proven what he was capable of. The next week, Hannah got married. The ceremony at Riverbend Estate was exactly as beautiful as the photos had promised. I stood beside her as maid of honor, holding her bouquet as she exchanged vows with Stephen. During the reception, I caught myself smiling. Really smiling. Not the polite social smile I'd perfected over the years, but genuine joy. Hannah and Stephen were dancing, her white dress twirling as he spun her around. Other friends laughed and celebrated, creating memories that had nothing to do with obligation or manipulation. This was what happiness looked like. Not the absence of family, but the presence of people who actually cared. As the DJ announced the last dance, Hannah pulled me onto the floor. "Dance with me," she insisted. "You're my sister in all the ways that matter." We danced together, swaying to some sentimental song about friendship, and standing there surrounded by people who chose to love me rather than use me, I realized something profound. My family's betrayal had cost me $200,000 and 4 years of my life. But in destroying my faith in them, they'd forced me to build something stronger. Faith in myself. Faith in my judgment. Faith in the family I could choose rather than the one I was born into. The money I'd reclaimed from my family, I decided to invest it in something worthwhile. Not revenge, not punishment, but building the life I deserved. I used part of it to start a small foundation that helped people escape financial exploitation by family members. The rest I invested wisely, building security that no one could take from me again. My grandmother had been right. The best revenge was a life well lived. And I was finally, truly living. 1 year after my grandmother's trust fund was rightfully restored to me, I received a certified letter. My father had died. A heart attack, sudden and unexpected. The funeral was in 3 days. I stared at the letter for a long time, feeling nothing. No grief, no sadness, not even the bitter satisfaction I might have expected. Just a hollow acknowledgement that a chapter had finally, completely closed. I didn't attend the funeral. Instead, I spent that day at my foundation's office, meeting with a young woman named Patricia, who'd been financially exploited by her parents for 8 years. She'd paid for her younger siblings' college educations while working 3 jobs, only to be cut out of the family when she finally said no to funding their next demand. They told me I was selfish. Patricia said, her voice shaking, that I owed them for raising me. "You don't owe anyone for being born," I replied, echoing words my therapist had told me months ago. Children aren't investments. They're people who deserve to grow into their own lives. After Patricia left, Feeling more empowered than when she'd arrived, I sat in my office and thought about my father. Had he understood, at the end, what he'd done? Had he realized that his greed had cost him a daughter who'd once loved him unconditionally? I'd never know. And surprisingly, I found I didn't care. 2 weeks later, my mother showed up at my house. I saw her through the window, standing on my porch, looking frail and uncertain. I considered not answering, but something, maybe closure, maybe curiosity, made me open the door. "Your father's dead," she said. No greeting, no pleasantries. "I know. You didn't come to the funeral." "No, I didn't." She looked past me into the house, taking in the comfortable furniture, the artwork on the walls, the life I'd built. "You've done well for yourself." "I have." "Jason's still struggling. He can't find decent work with his record. He's been applying everywhere, but—" "Mom," I interrupted. "Why are you here?" Her face crumpled slightly. "Because I'm alone. Your father's gone, Jason's useless, and I can't manage on my own. Because despite everything, I'm still your mother." I looked at this woman who'd given birth to me, raised me, and then systematically destroyed my trust in family bonds. She was smaller than I remembered, worn down by consequences she'd never anticipated. "You want to know something?" I said quietly. "For years, I dreamed about this moment, about you finally understanding what you'd lost, finally feeling the emptiness you created. But standing here now, I don't feel victorious. I just feel tired." "Then help me," she pleaded. "If you're tired of fighting, just help me. I'm begging you." "I am helping you," I replied. "I'm helping you experience the full weight of your choices. Every struggle you face, every hardship, those are the consequences you earned. And I'm not going to rob you of those lessons by swooping in to fix things. That's cruel, Mariah." "No, Mom. Cruelty was laughing at me when I was denied my inheritance. Cruelty was pocketing money meant for Jason's medical care. Cruelty was teaching my brother that exploiting me was acceptable. What I'm doing now, this is called boundaries, and I'm finally healthy enough to maintain them." She turned to leave, then paused. "I hope you're happy, Mariah. I hope all of this was worth it." "It wasn't about worth," I said to her, retreating back. "It was about survival. And yes, Mom, I am happy. Happier than I ever was when I was trying to earn love from people who saw me as an ATM." She left, and I closed the door on that chapter of my life for good. That evening, I met Hannah and Stephen for dinner. Their son, barely 3 months old, slept peacefully in Hannah's arms. They'd asked me to be his godmother, a role I'd accepted with tears in my eyes. "How are you doing?" Hannah asked, seeing something in my face. "My mother came by today," I said, "wanting help, wanting me to fix their problems. And I said no, cleanly, clearly, finally." Stephen raised his glass. "To boundaries. To chosen family," Hannah added. "To living well," I finished. We clinked glasses, and I felt the last piece of old pain finally release its grip on my heart. My mother eventually moved to a subsidized housing unit, living on Social Security and whatever part-time work she could find. Jason married someone equally damaged, and together they struggled through life, each blaming the other for their failures. Neither of them ever took responsibility for what they'd done to me, preferring to cast themselves as victims of my cruelty. I heard these updates from distant relatives occasionally, and each time felt nothing but relief that I was no longer part of that dysfunction. The foundation I created helped 73 people in its first 2 years escape financial exploitation by family members. Each person who walked through our doors represented a version of my former self, someone who'd confused sacrifice with love, duty with destruction, and each person we helped felt like redemption for the years I'd lost. Standing in my home office 5 years after my grandmother's will was read, I looked at the photo on my desk, Hannah, Stephen, their children, and me at the beach, laughing at something silly and inconsequential. This was my family now. The people who celebrated my successes, supported my boundaries, and loved me without keeping score. My revenge hadn't been about destroying my family. They'd done that to themselves. My revenge had been simpler and far more powerful. I'd built a life so fulfilling, so complete, that their absence from it was a blessing rather than a loss.